Well, thank you everybody for attending, even those that are just here to heckle or pick on me. I've been doing this a long time, so let me just hop right into my presentation. I used to love these slides, so I threw up my own disclaimer. These slides represent my opinions. Some of the information may be old and outdated. It has not been reviewed by anybody, and anybody can steal anything they want. So some of the stuff I do have some examples of some things we've done with a web data entry form with the code behind it and all that other fun stuff. You also have the possibility that I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. So take all this with a grain of salt. Some of my background. My name is Michael Reed. I am the manager of enterprise financial information systems for Textron in Providence, Rhode Island. I am in wonderful Providence, Rhode Island right now to make sure I have an uninterrupted internet stream. Unfortunately, I noticed the last 2 days during solutions that I don't have the best internet connection at home. I started out as an accountant. I absolutely hated being an accountant, so I got lucky enough to get pulled into finance systems. Back in 1994, I bet you Ali wasn't even alive in 1994. So I've been around for a while. So I started out as an Essbase guy. And for those people that might be old enough to remember, I found my Dimensions 97 badge. That was the second Essbase conference ever. I was at Dimensions 96. I just couldn't find my badge. We've been doing Hyperion planning here at Textron since 2002, but we're here to talk about HFM. We implemented HFM and went live the end of 2000. We were the 9th customer to purchase HFM and the 3rd customer to go live, but the first one with currency conversion and process management. I've done many presentations at many places, and most people don't like them, so if you want to hang up now, I don't get offended. Textron, what are we? This is just a quick slide of some of the products that Textron makes. We're a company that nobody knows, but they all know the products that we have. Our aviation businesses, Beechcraft, Cessna, Hawker, Bell Helicopter. We own Arctic Cat and E-Z-Go Golf Cars and a ton of other companies. Our most recent acquisition is a company called How and How out of Maine, close to my heart. You should check out some videos of the stuff they've made. We've integrated their stuff to our robotics companies, and we're doing a lot of unmanned military and rescue vehicles. We have an unmanned firefighting vehicle now that can go into the hazardous areas the firefighters don't have to go into. Okay, just a little background of what we started with. Back in pre-2000, we had Essbase as our consolidation system, believe it or not. We had 332 legal entities that were broken down to 20 business units within 6 segments. On a monthly basis, we got 20 data submits. We did not have a legal entity consolidation system. It was not feasible at the time. So our 20 business units would submit us some numbers that they did in Excel, a template that we'd give them, and they'd always submit everything in US dollars. One thing we noticed, they would use whatever exchange rate made their numbers look the best at the time. And also back in 2000, Textron did not have a global network. We were located in 17 different countries, and I would say about a third of our business units did not have, a third of our entities didn't have internet access. So what I want to talk about is some of the silly things that we did when we built HFM, and things for people to think about when they're building their applications. Some of these slides are just silly, and some of these slides hopefully will help you and possibly give you some ideas for your applications. One of the first things that we did is our management wanted to be able to do department level or function level reporting. So we added Custom One, and we added these great members for all of our functions. It was great. The problem was we never talked to our end users and found out that nobody could give us the data. We built an application. We built in a custom dimension with about a dozen members. And the only member that we use to this day is none. We do have a little bit of data that we collect in a supplemental scenario that we can do departmental level stuff. But all of our consolidation data comes in at none. The problem being nobody had the data. And even to this day, we don't have the data to get what is finance. If we have two accountants that work in HR, are they or are they not part of the finance function? So one of the silly things that I want to make sure I get across is just make sure that before you start putting stuff into your application, make sure you can get the data to populate it. Okay. Another nice use of custom dimension that we took from our Essbase application, which I will take credit for, Chris Barberi and I argue about this all the time, is our custom 2 dimension, which is a data type dimension. We had this in our Essbase application back in 1994. We copied it into our HFM application, and it allows us to be able to collect our data and be able to report on it at different levels. Most everybody's application has a data type dimension in it. FCC, it's a default dimension now, and it allows you to be able to see where data is coming from. But one of the things that we did wrong is we used specific product names in our member names. We have a member called base HAL load. I've talked on a couple other of these presentations about HAL. HAL was the tool that we used to load the data into the system. It should have been called base load. It's a bad idea to put a product specific name in a member. The worst part of our data type dimension is we only use our base adjustment member, our base load member, our base manual number, which is where we write all of our web form data to, and an auto elim member, and none, of course. Out of 18 members in our custom 2 dimension, we only use 9 of them. There is an impact on performance when you're pulling parent level members of your custom dimensions. And it just was a very poorly, we listened to our customer a little bit too much. Our consultants were like, okay, we'll build you what you ask for. And they didn't give us any pushback on some of the design implementations. Unfortunately, we didn't have a consultant that would actually push back on us. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna slow down a little bit because I'm gonna run through my slides too quickly. Our account dimension, you can use accounts for more than just financial data. For example, we have a custom application. It's a web-based application that allows users to input forecasted data into our HFM consolidation system. They are not building a forecast. They're just putting in their P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, some PP&E, and other data. It's a customized web front end that allows them to put data in and save it. We created a member that flags the time that the schedules were last saved. The reason we do that is so people can't say, hey, I ran this report at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You guys changed my data. Like, no, you guys resaved the data at such and such a time. We've also used our chart of accounts. We have a whole section we call flag accounts. We have an HS impact rule that when you calculate your numbers in December of 2020, it will change the calc status of an entity in January of 2021. That rule is set based on an a year status account that we can put a 1 or a 0 in. When we put a 1 in it, the rule is active and it will impact the next year. If we put a 0 in it, it won't impact the next year. The reason that we did that is because when we're consolidating or reconsolidating a full year worth of data, we don't want it to be opening the tables for the next year. We want to limit the amount of stuff we're loading into memory so we can get our best performance of what we're calculating. So don't think your accounts have to be financial accounts. So many people limit their thought process, but we'll get there. Sorry, 1 second. I have my Skype open that I should have closed. I'm going away for a second. All right. Sorry about that. The bad. This is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen designed in an application, and it is still in my production HFM application after 20 years. We have an out of balance account that checks our assets versus our liabilities and equity. The out of balance that's calculated is then written to an account that is part of our liability section. So if somebody pulls a report that pulls total assets and then pulls total liabilities and equity, it's going to tell them that they're in balance, because our out of balance is part of our chart of accounts in our liability section. It should not be in there. It should be under a validation section. It should not be part of our P&L. We have attempted to move it out, but we don't want to go through a rewrite of the application, so we live with it. Just make sure that when you're building your application that you don't do silly things that we've done. The other really bad thing that we did is when our consultants were putting in historical data, they identified that there was an account in our cost section that was flagged as an asset. So costs are natural credit balances. We sign flip, so we have a positive number in there because all of our data in HFM is positive because the financial reporting system. And if you were to drill into our chart of accounts, nothing, our P&L section has a section that doesn't foot. Because the account is flagged as an asset, it's going to be loaded as a natural sign as an asset. It's just horrible, horrible design. Okay, now I'm going to talk about some of the things that we've done to help our end users. Task lists. I'm hoping everybody uses task lists. When we first put HFM in, task lists weren't a thing. When they first came out, we didn't use them because we didn't understand them. But when we figured out what we can do with task lists, we've built a couple. The primary one lists all the tasks that need to be completed for month end. We tried to structure them in the order that people have to complete their tasks. So the very first thing, we have a link that opens up FDMEE that they can go in and load their data. We then have a list of all the web forms that they need to fill out. We have the process control module. Then we have the journal module. We put the journal module after they're done with their data because we discourage journal entries. I'll discuss that in a few minutes. I am monitoring questions. If anybody does have them, I am going through this quickly. I really want to get to a couple of things towards the end of this, and I don't want to miss out. Okay. Web data entry forms. When we originally had our application built, we used a third party back in 1999, 2000, and every roll forward had its own web form. So we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60 roll forwards, and every one of them was its own web form. And navigating through all those web forms was a pain in the butt. We were smart. We built a report that could validate that people had filled out all their web forms properly. But having to trudge through 60 web forms was crazy. So we decided, why don't we build multiple roll forwards or common roll forwards into one web form? So in this one, for example, we have all of our receivables and our borrowed funds roll forwards in one web form. We've done the same thing with our payables and all of our other web forms. We netted them together. Well, as anybody that knows me knows that I'm very friendly and I talk to a lot of people, and I visit our business units, and I was just talking to them and I was showing them a new feature with Smartview about being able to open web forms in Smartview. And they loved the idea because they could open up the last month's web form in Smartview while they were filling out their current month, because they wanted to see which rows they filled out last month versus which rows they filled out this month. So we made an even better web form. We went in and we decided we'll show current month, which is needed to be input, and prior month. Unfortunately, I took the screenshot as me, as an admin. When the business unit opens up, all the cells to the right-hand side are all green. They're no input. They're only there for informational. This allows the user, when they click on one of the 16 or so web forms that we have, they can see what they filled out last month and what they need to fill out this month. I know that sounds stupid, because if you filled it out last month, wouldn't you remember you have to fill it out this month? People only go into the system maybe a couple hours a month and they forget what they have to fill out. So the nice thing about these web forms is they're dynamic. You can reference your point of view to create your web form. So I included on here the code or the script or whatever you want to call it that created this web form. So on the left-hand side here, you can see all the I don't even know what it's called, VB. I'm not a programmer, forgive me. But what I wanted to call out is I actually have separate lines in another slide that show you, all right, in this, I'm not sure if my mouse will show up on here or not, but in the very first column, we're referencing the current year and the current period. What that's referencing is it's actually referencing the point of view for the web form. It's pulling the year from the point of view and the month from the point of view. When we get down to the fifth column, we actually are doing the current year, but we're doing the previous period. What the previous period is doing, it reads your current month and gives you the previous month. The fun thing about this, and we didn't know if it would work or not, is when you get to January of 2021, the system, HFM, knows that the previous month is December. It also will set your year to 2020. So it actually changes your year based on the previous month. I thought that was the coolest thing. I just didn't expect that to work. The other thing that we do in all our forms, which I'm hoping most people do, we did not do this in the beginning because we didn't want certain accounts showing up on our forms. So we used to go through and what we call cherry pick what we wanted to show. We no longer do that. Because of the amount of maintenance, we set everything up to be using the descendants feature. So when we add a new member to our accounts receivable roll forward, it will automatically get added. There's no maintenance. I've done several presentations on Hyperion reports, and one of the things, I'm lazy. I don't want to do maintenance. I don't want to touch things multiple times. I want to make sure that when we add accounts, I don't have to do maintenance on my web forms. The other thing that we've done recently is we add 2 blank rows to the bottom of every web form. There is a quirky thing that's happening. Some people have it, some people don't, where we couldn't see the last row and a half of a web form. So we've added 2 blank rows to shift everything up a little bit. So when people are opening web forms, whether it's on a 27-inch monitor or a 13-inch laptop monitor or a 9-inch tablet, they can see all the rows. We have, most of our web forms are small and simple. We have some ugly web forms. What I mean by ugly is we have a web form that has 228 rows by 35 columns. It's a very horrible design of a web form, but it's a necessary evil. We had originally broken it up into multiple forms, and then Oracle and their development of Smartview came up with some great features, one of which is opening web data entry forms in Excel. So when somebody has to find, unfortunately on the web, you can't do a find in a web form. It just doesn't work. At least it's never worked for me. But our users can open up the web form in Excel, do a find, and they can find exactly which country they're looking for. These web forms specifically are for our government reporting. It's a once a year form that has to be filled out, and we have several of them that are just horrible. So what we do is we allow them to open them in Smartview. I'm not sure how many people have used Smartview for this, but we can actually open up our all files task list and then drill in and see all of our web forms and open the form that we need to use. Okay, so I am jumping around with a ton of different subjects of good things that we've done and some silly things we've done. So now I'm actually going to jump into Smartview itself. A couple of these slides I added today because I wanted to talk about the difference, some of the silly things that we've fixed over the years. So we went live in 2000, I think it was November of 2000. We built maybe 50 or 60 Smartview reports that we sent to the business units for them to be able to retrieve. Over the years, we have tens of thousands of Excel Smartview reports, and they're all built using the Smartview formulas, the HS get values, the HS descriptions, so on and so forth. And Those are great. They worked well. They did a wonderful job, and they're still great for small reports, small being under 500 cells of data. We had some huge, huge reports that we started converting from these Smartview formula files to Ad-Hoc files. I have to give Oracle a huge shout out to this. Ad-Hoc for HFM has changed significantly over the years. It went from a feature, I was an Essbase guy, I had the classic Essbase add-in. Then they said, oh, Ad-Hoc's the same thing. It wasn't. The new Ad-Hoc, especially the one today, is awesome. So we went through and converted a lot of our old, very large reports to Ad-Hoc. Why did we do that? I mean, we already had them all built. Why waste your time? Well, one example, when you retrieve a Smartview formula report, every single cell that has a formula is an individual query to the database. Now, this is where I don't know if they've changed this, but pre-11.1.2, this was true, and I'm assuming it's still true today. So every single cell is asking for a piece of data, one piece of data at a time. Where in Ad-Hoc, it sends the entire grid to the data as a single query. So our intercompany matching report, we have a manual report that we've built here that has all 360 entities down the left-hand side and all 360 intercompany partners across the columns. And we have 10 intercompany accounts. So this one report is pulling 10 sheets, 360 rows by 360 columns. That was 1.296 million formulas. They would set the retrieve, they'd go get a cup of coffee, they'd chit chat with 2 or 3 people, they'd come back to their office, and then the refresh may have finished. It was taking anywhere between 15 and 20 minutes. This wasn't even our largest retrieve. Our tax department had retrieves that were 10 to 15 times this size. Some of them would take 2 hours to run, and then at the end of it, their Excel may crash, their machine may shut down on them. It was just horrible. When we converted this 1.2 million, 1.3 million cell retrieve into an Ad-Hoc, it takes about 15 to 20 seconds to retrieve. So we went from 15 to 20 minutes to 15 to 20 seconds by switching from a formula to an Ad-Hoc. I personally think there's still place for formulas, especially in my smaller, highly formatted reports. My tech person would disagree with me. I do agree with him that we teach Ad-Hoc first and then the formulas second. Okay, I added this slide specifically from the meeting that I just saw before this one. We here at Textron, we're a pretty large company. We used to have 20 business units around the globe. And when we were building HFM, we asked everybody to send us what they would want as calculations. And one of the examples was days sales outstanding. We reached out to 20 business units for their calculation of days sales outstanding. We got 12 different answers. They calculated it 12 different ways. How could you calculate one thing 12 different ways? Well, we came up and agreed upon a single definition of the formula, put it into the database. By putting it in the database, if somebody pulls it into a Hyperion report, somebody pulls it into a Smartview retrieve, and they pull that account, they're always going to get the same number based on the same calculation. We don't have to rely on people building the calculation the same from file to file. We actually have more calculated accounts in our application than we have base level accounts. About 90, actually, yes, ones I consider roll forwards. So it's about 50-50 now. So if we can calculate it in the database and standardize it, we make sure we put it in the database. Okay. Either I'm talking really fast or nobody has any questions. This is my New England person. I talk real fast. Okay. So we still use old school member lists. We're not using any of these dynamic member lists. We're not using anything fancy. We're just using straight up text file with member lists. We utilize our member lists for reporting. We utilize it to simplify some process control steps. We actually have a member list that has our business units listed out. So when somebody goes into process control, they can see what review level they are. We use process management. I'll be talking about that in a bit. It just simplifies them so they don't have to drill into the hierarchy. Accountants are lazy. I'm in my finance department. Somebody's going to come in and kill me. We also use our member list for custom data extracts. My next slide, I'll talk about that. I do implore you, if you're going to look into using member lists, or if you use them now, make sure you document your member lists. You can put comments at the end of each row to tell people what it's doing. And what I mean by that, for example, this is some of the member lists that we have in our system. Our year member lists, we actually have our forecast year and a forecast prior year in the system. We also have current year and last year. And people are always like, every time I show this slide, people are like, wait, what do you mean you have a forecast year and a forecast prior year and a current year and a last year? Isn't it the same thing? 11 out of 12 months, it is the same thing. The problem is January. When you're in January and we're doing our forecast, we're forecasting so this coming January we'll be forecasting 2021. 90% of my user base use actuals. Their current year in January is still going to be 2020 until year end is completed. So for at least a month, our forecast year and our current year are different. And because we don't want to do maintenance on our reports, we've added these members in our member lists, refer to them in our reports. So when we do switch them into our member list, I don't have to update 75 to 100 reports. Excuse me. Going back to the, I'm lazy, I don't like doing maintenance if I don't have to. On our member list, we have a section for our account section. Some of them we built way back when to let people know what accounts have to be identified as departmental. So which ones require a department on it. We can delete that, but it would require me to change a bunch of things, and I don't like changing things just to change them. So we just left it there. But the ones down on the bottom, we have some custom data extracts where we feed other applications. So we have a corporate office expense database that we have to pull corporate ledger data out to feed to that database. There's only certain accounts that we need to do. When they require a new account, instead of having the programmer have to go into our custom application and say, oh, I need to add this account to the extract, we can go into our member list for our accounts and just add another account to that list. Same thing, I don't know if I put entities up here, I didn't. We have a list of which corporate entities we need to pull data out to feed into that application as well. We add corporate ledgers all the time. I think we do that more than I change my shoes. And we just maintain the member list instead of having to maintain the code. That way that function is back in the finance department and we can control what's being moved. Okay, I'm doing good on time. I have 15 minutes. I better move. All right. Some other things that we do that are a little bit strange that I like talking about is security. We have many business units. So when we set up security for an end user, we actually created some security classes that aren't in HFM at all. We have these security classes by entity. So when somebody at Cowtex, KX Consol here in the middle, asks for a new user, I give them read access to that security class. That doesn't give them access to Diddly, but I can extract my security file, which is just a wonderful text file, throw it into a Power BI view and say, all right, give me all my users of Cowtex. It will go in, look at that security class and filter out everybody except for the users of Cowtex. If somebody at our aviation division wants to know who their users are, I can do the exact same thing because it's all identified using security classes. If we have somebody that's authorized to request security, each business unit has 2 data owners. We make them all access. So if somebody comes to me and says, oh, this person at aviation needs access, who can they request it of? I can go to my Power BI, pull up all my data owners, see who my aviation data owner is, and that person can request access. So think out of the box with some of these things. Security, I hate shared services, but there's some real fun things you can do with it. Hopping over to FDMEE. Some of the things that we've done is we try to keep our FDMEE location name the same exact name as the HFM entity. It makes it easier for us when somebody calls up with a problem saying, hey, I'm loading such and such a business unit. I'm having a problem. Well, when we go into FDM, I don't have to search and find out what location they're using. I can just take the entity name and look at that. We have three business units right now that load multiple entities at a time. So our aviation business has like 32 entities they load at once. They're old entities that just have inventory and other things. So we have to come up with different names for them, but when possible, we try to keep them the same. We do utilize the roles in FDMEE. We actually have two different classes of users. We have full users that can modify mapping files, and then we have users that can't. The fun thing with the latest version of FDMEE, it creates all kinds of wonderful local groups in your shared services, and it's a pain in the butt to get reports out on, but we do use just two different roles. Oh, the other thing. I love all these presentations, no offense to the consultants out there, that talk about linking to source systems and drilling through and all this other stuff. When we first put FDM in, we had 100 source systems. Yes, that's 100 different ERP systems. Yes, we might have had SAP, but we might have had 15 instances of it in different locations. We can't link to that many. We'd be maintaining links for our whole life. Even today, we still have over 40 sources. It just wouldn't be feasible to be able to link to all those. The other thing is, if you want to drill through, that user has to have access to that system they're drilling through to. So that would be a licensing thing on top of that. It just was crazy. So we don't link anything. The other thing that we've done in FDMEE, and Anthony Scalise did a great presentation a couple of years ago at Kscope about customizing your reports. We've actually customized the most important report, in my opinion. It's the base trial balance report that shows you the value that was loaded into FDM and the value being written to HFM to help you find sign flip issues. But we've also included, we can read from HFM the account descriptions. So the canned report just would show me the account 707-100. It wouldn't tell you what that means or what that is. So our developer talked and dug into it and found out that, oh yeah, I can read from HFM the description and pull it straight in. So our reports are much more meaningful. Okay. Couple things on journal entries. I'm going to go quickly on this. We don't use journal entries much. We don't want people using journal entries. FDM is so easy to use that if there's a resubmit required, we make them make the change in their source system and re-upload. But we do utilize journal entries for new acquisitions. We actually have a journal template that's a P&L, a balance sheet, and cash flow. So we have 3 different templates that they can go in and they put all their P&L numbers in, all their balance sheet numbers in, and all of their cash flow information in. We used to use web forms for that. The problem with web forms, without turning on some audit features, you can't tell who did what when. The journal entries are, you can see who did it, who approved it, and who posted it. It's a great way to utilize your journal entries that we hadn't thought of. But we probably only have 20 to 30 journal entries a month now, where we used to have hundreds. We have 2 applications. We have one application, which is our main consolidation system. It's very vast. It's got a decent amount of accounts in it, but it's also, so let me tell you why we have a second application instead of the first one. Our second application is very, 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 very specific for government reporting. We have a custom dimension that has our countries in it because we have certain items that we have to collect by sales services to, sales services from, purchases to. I think some of the requirements is because we're a government contractor, we have to tell them where we're buying our stuff and where it's being sold. And if we know if we're selling to a distributor and we know where that's being sold, we have to report that as well. We didn't want to muddy up our HFM application, our primary application, with hundreds of thousands of different members that weren't going to be used every month. And it wouldn't have been pretty. So we created a second application. And if we were to move to the cloud, we would probably keep it a separate application because it doesn't make sense to put everything into one place. Actually, if we have a change our application, I'm going to split it probably into multiples because we get forecast and AOP data the heck out of HFM. Another whole problem. Okay, so a lot of people don't use process management. And I love process management. So I'm going to talk about process management for the next 8 minutes. I could go on for hours. But before I talk about that, let me tell you something I learned. When you're loading if you extract and reload security into an application, there's a little checkbox that says, oh, do you want to clear all the security before you load the new file? If you use process management, don't check that box. By checking that box, it deletes everything, including the process management that's been done over the years. In my application, I can go back and see who promoted a certain entity back in 2003 if I wanted to. By loading the security and putting clear all, it wipes it all out. So be very careful with some of these check boxes when you're loading stuff into the system. The other one that I did that was funny is when I loaded metadata once, when we were moving a couple entities, I loaded it in merge mode instead of replace mode. When you do that, your entity shows up in multiple places. It's very confusing. All right. So the nice thing about process management, it uses a combination of security class and entity. We use a combination of entity and scenario to give access to business units, to different locations. Everybody in the application has all access to all accounts, because if they only have read access to an entity and read access to a scenario, they still only have read access. Process management controls when that access is in place. So what do I mean by that? We use process management to control the flow of data. When our data is from review level 1 to review level 6, it is at our business unit's disposal. They have full access to that data. They can load, they can make journal entries, they can calculate, consolidate, whatever they want to do from review level 1 to 6. Once it's at 7, it's corporate office only. All the business units are in read only at that time. The nice thing about that is it ensures that when we're doing our consolidation, that nobody's futzing and changing the data in the back end. When the month is completed, we promote to review level 8. We do not publish. The reason we don't publish, I thought I had a slide on this, and I don't think I do, is if you publish data and you have to move an entity or a business unit from one segment to another segment, you have to go back through all your years and unpublish to be able to reconsolidate to get your totals to change and then republish. By going to review level 8, I'm the only person with admin access. I'm the only person that can impact data at review level 8. So if we move an entity to a new segment, I can reconsolidate all of time without doing anything other than loading metadata in and reconsolidating. Oh, I should have put something in there about the consolidations. Oh well. All right, so some of our business units, when we originally designed this, wanted the ability to have their base level entities do data, input data and change data, and then submit it to them before they submitted it to us. So some of our business units, our entity level accountant will have all access when data is at review level 1. And when they're done with their data, they promote to review level 2. The business unit, this is specifically our German company, they have full access to that data. If they need a change to that, they can reject it back to review level 1, and then that person has to change their data. Unfortunately, to be able to reject data, you have to have all access to it. I really wish I could have somebody have read access and promote and reject data. Hopefully I can do that in FCC. So a base level entity has all access at review level 1, they promote to review level 2. And then it goes to a business unit accountant. So in this example, this person only has access to our sub entity 1.1. Our business unit has all access to all the data from review level 1 through 6. So they can help the entity adjust their data. We don't allow parent adjustments. I only put the yellow there because it's easier than trying to highlight green and explain in the green. So a business unit has full control and they can adjust and make changes to data until they promote to review level 7. So a business unit user has review level 1 through 6 access, and then they can promote to 7, at which point they have read-only access. This was all great when we designed it. At this point, corporate has no access to any data before it's at review level 7. Once it's at review level 7, they now have access to it. This keeps us from having the corporate people call the business unit people and asking questions before data is done. Well, we had a problem. We have corporate users. Oh, this next slide is not a good slide. We have corporate users that are also inputters of data. So we have people at corporate that have write access to the data, even when it's at review level 7 access. That's a problem. That's why we came up with promoting to review level 8. Then the corporate people can't change any data. Sorry, that's this slide. I went a little bit too quickly. The last slide I'll just delete out of this deck. So we have people at corporate that at all times have full access to all data. And there's no, I have not figured a way around that without creating secondary IDs, which our IT department had suggested, and I don't want to do that either. Once the month is done, everything's promoted to review level 8. And here's the reason we don't publish, because if you publish data, you then lose the ability to modify your hierarchy and reconsolidate without going through and unpublishing all your data. Okay, I can't believe I covered all 37 slides in 45 minutes. That was very fast, and I apologize if I missed anything. So anybody have any questions? I cannot see the chat panel for some reason.
There have been no questions in the Q&A. The chat has had some people talking.
Picking on me?
A little, but not completely.
I'm okay with that. No, I did go this pretty quickly. The one thing I wanted to start with this too. I think this has been awesome this week, and I want to thank Interrel for inviting me to speak, and Interrel for having this whole thing go on. The fact that one of the, probably the largest consulting company out there in the Hyperion world invited other consulting companies to give presentations, I think that's awesome. Oh, I have a Q&A. Are you able to lock data at review level 8, as I can only lock entity data in published status? Okay, so no, we don't lock data. So the reason I move it to review level 8, nobody has access to the data at review level 8 other than the administrator. So where I'm the administrator, I'm the only person that can impact the data. Nobody else can. They can't use web forms. They can't run a calculation. They can't run a consolidation. Once it gets past review level 8, they all have read-only access in it. So we don't have to lock it. The reason, maybe lock was the term I was looking for too. The reason we don't publish and lock data is because you can't change anything historically. And Textron is very good at moving entities from one business unit to another. And our data goes back to 1996. And with the way that roll forwards work, every time we move an entity, I have to go back to 1996 and consolidate all the way through current year. So we don't lock or publish. So I'm guessing you lock the data so it can't change. We update metadata probably every month other than December, and sometimes twice a month. And we've even changed it in December, even though we're not supposed to. We try to freeze metadata, but it never works. There's always something that comes up. You can ask me any HFM question, even if I didn't present on it. I've been doing HFM a long time. I am fortunate enough to be on the product advisory board. So I'm not Rich Wilkie's best friend. I love Rich, but he probably hates me some days.
A question came into the chat panel.
Okay.
Any thought to the universal data adapter with FDMEE to essentially drill back to FDMEE with the detailed stored there versus assigning new licenses to source systems?
Yeah, the problem we have with FDMEE is we don't have enough licenses of FDMEE. So we only have 100 licenses for 125 licenses to FDMEE, and we have 440 HFM licenses. So we don't allow drill through back to FDMEE. That's a great idea. Unfortunately, because of licensing restrictions, we don't do it. I have another question I'm looking up the answer to. There's a feature within, sorry, I had to move my monitor down so I could see my keyboard. There's a feature within HFM that allows you to run different tasks and set one off when the previous one completes. It's in the console administration feature, and I want to say it's called task flows. So when we make a change, when I have to consolidate 1996 onwards, I have a task flow that's set up that says, all right, go out and consolidate 1996. When 1996 is done, it goes to 97, then 98, then 99, so on and so forth. So the task flow allows you to set up each consolidation and not kick one off until the previous one's completed. It is a very tedious thing to set up, but once it's done, it will do nothing but save you time. So if you have, even if you have to go back 5 years, if your consolidation takes 2 or 3 hours, and if you're like my company, you can only do it on the weekends, it's nice to be able to set it off on Saturday morning and let it run on its own. So I apologize, I cannot pronounce the name, maybe it's Keese. If you have questions on that, if you want to see something more specific, I am happy to show you our task flow. My email address is down here. And as anybody will tell you that have met me in other presentations, I love helping people. This is why I love Interrel. We all learn from each other. Okay, any other questions? I do apologize. I didn't think I had enough slides, so I added some slides, and then I was like, oh, I'm not gonna have time to finish this. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to email me. I'm not the quickest getting back in emails. If you don't get a response in like 3 to 4 business days, send me it again. But I love helping. Everything I learned from our community, and you got to give back what you get. So please don't hesitate to call. If nobody has any other questions, I am going to pass back to Allie control. I don't know how to do that. Allie, can you just take it?
Yes, I can. This is Tammy, by the way.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine.
I asked earlier. I thought you said it was Allie.
She's probably been the one that's been contacting you for everything.
Okay. Thank you very much for anybody who attended, and I hope you got something out of this. If you have questions on any of the forms or anything I did, I'm happy to help, or even how to do the report change in FDMEE. I could try to help you walk through that code. And my company's cheap. We don't buy anything. So EPM Mastro, I would have loved to own, but they said no. Perry, thank you for your comment. Please reach out if you guys have any questions at all. All right, I'm going to end now so I can go home. Have a great day.